The text message came in at 11:37 on a Tuesday night. I was still at my desk, still in the clothes I'd worn to court that morning, cold coffee sitting next to a stack of closing documents I'd been reviewing for the past 3 hours. I almost didn't check my phone. I almost let it wait until morning. I picked it up. You will sign over your share of the house by Friday, or I will make sure everyone in your firm knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Your choice. My brother had sent that from his couch. I know, because I could hear the television in the background when he called 5 minutes later and I didn't answer. Some laugh track playing on whatever show he was watching. A regular Tuesday night for him. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me. I set the phone face down on the desk. I picked up my pen. I went back to the closing documents. But I wasn't reading them anymore. Let me back up, because if I start there, you won't understand why it took me 29 years to finally stop answering. My parents bought the house in 1994, a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus. The kind of house with a covered front porch and a maple tree in the backyard that turned to color in October you genuinely could not believe. My mother planted roses along the left side of the fence every spring. My father painted the shutters forest green himself, up on a ladder, the summer before I was born. That house was the only thing they owned outright by the time they died. Everything else, the car loans, the credit cards, the medical debt from my father's last 2 years, was gone before the estate closed. But the house was free and clear, and it was left equally to me and my brother, whose name is Daniel. I am a real estate attorney. I have been for 4 years. Before that I was in law school, and before that I was the daughter who did everything right, because someone in this family had to. Daniel is 3 years older than me. He has never held a job for longer than 14 months. He has borrowed money from every person who has ever loved him, including our parents while they were alive, including me more times than I can count now without feeling something cold move through my chest. He is charming in the way that a place can look beautiful from a distance, and then you get close and realize the foundation is completely rotted through. He was always our mother's favorite. Not because she was a bad person. She wasn't. She just believed, the way some mothers do, that the child who needed the most had to be given the most, and she never once questioned whether the need was real or just well performed. I was the one who didn't need anything. That's what they thought. I handled things. I was fine when our father got sick. I took the unpaid family leave from my second-year associate position and drove the 4 hours home and managed the caregiving schedule and the insurance appeals and the prescription coordination, while Daniel visited twice and both times asked my father for money before he left. When our mother died 14 months later, quickly, a stroke, no warning, no goodbye, I was the one who planned the funeral and notified the relatives and sat with the grief counselor and then drove back to Columbus and went to work the following Monday because I had cases that needed me and I didn't know what else to do with myself. Daniel called me 3 weeks after the funeral to ask if I'd thought about what we were doing with the house. I told him I barely thought about anything yet. He said he thought we should sell it, split the proceeds. He said he had some opportunities he was looking at, some things he wanted to invest in. He just needed some capital to get started. I recognized the shape of the conversation immediately. I had been in versions of it my entire life. I told him I wasn't ready to sell. The house had just become ours. Our mother's roses were still in the ground. He said that was sentimental and not practical. I said I'd think about it. That was 11 months before the text message. In those 11 months, Daniel called me 14 times about the house. He emailed the estate attorney twice trying to initiate a sale without my signature, and the attorney, correctly, told him that both parties had to agree. He showed up at the house unannounced in March and let himself in with his key, and I found out because the neighbor across the street called me to let me know someone was there. I drove out on a Saturday and found him in the kitchen going through a drawer that still had my mother's handwriting on grocery lists inside it, and I stood in the doorway and felt something I didn't have a word for yet. I told him he needed to call before coming. He told me I was being controlling. He told me I'd always been like this. Difficult, cold, unable to just let things go and move forward. He told me our parents would have wanted us to work together. I thought about the text message my father sent Daniel in 2019, asking him to please pay back the $4,000 he'd borrowed. I thought about the fact that Daniel never did. I thought about standing in the hallway of the hospital the night my father's kidneys started failing, making calls, making decisions, while Daniel sat in the waiting room and played something on his phone. I said I would think about it. I drove home. I started paying attention. This is the part I have to explain carefully, because it matters legally and I want you to understand exactly what happened. In April, I decided to do a routine title search on the property. I do this professionally. It takes me about 20 minutes and it costs nothing. I wasn't suspicious of anything specific. I told myself I was just being thorough, the way I am about everything, the way I've always been. What I found made me sit completely still for a long time. There was a quitclaim deed filed with the county recorder's office in February. It transferred my half of the property to Daniel. It bore what appeared to be my signature, notarized by someone I had never met, in a county I'd never been to, on a date when I was in depositions in Columbus from 8 in the morning until 6:30 in the evening, with 4 other attorneys who could confirm that. Someone had forged my signature on a legal document and filed it with the county. My brother had forged my signature on a legal document and filed it with the county. I am a real estate attorney. I know exactly what a forged quitclaim deed is. I know exactly what a forged quitclaim deed is. I know exactly what it means when someone files one. I know what the criminal exposure looks like: deed fraud, forgery, filing false instruments. I know what the civil remedies are. I know which calls to make and in what order. I made none of them yet. I closed my laptop. I went for a walk. I walked for almost an hour, through my neighborhood, past the coffee shop and the park, and the elementary school with the little kids' drawings still taped inside the windows. And I thought about my brother. I thought about the 11 months of phone calls. I thought about him standing in my mother's kitchen, going through her drawer. I thought about the text that had not yet arrived, but that I already somehow knew was coming. And I made a decision. I was not going to call the police that day. I was not going to call the police that day. I was not going to confront Daniel. I was not going to do anything that would alert him to the fact that I knew, because I needed him to believe he had already won. I needed him comfortable. I needed him to keep moving forward with whatever he was planning, right up until the moment I was completely ready. I went home. I called my colleague, a woman I have known since law school who now handles criminal defense and has the sharpest legal mind of anyone I've ever met. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." The next 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. I kept answering Daniel's calls. I kept saying I was thinking about it. I matched his energy perfectly, slightly tired, slightly non-committal, occasionally agreeing to timeline extensions that I had absolutely no intention of honoring. I told him once, casually, that I'd been talking to a financial advisor about maybe liquidating some assets, that I was coming around to the idea of selling. He sounded so relieved it made me feel something I am still not sure how to categorize. Behind that, I was working. My colleague helped me file an emergency motion to void the fraudulent deed, which was granted based on the alibi documentation from the deposition that day. Timestamped transcripts, attorney billing records, courthouse security logs. The county recorder's office flagged the filing as potentially fraudulent and opened their own internal review. We documented the chain of evidence carefully: the original deed, the forged signature, the notary stamp, which came from a notary who, when contacted, had no record of performing that notarization and was very interested to hear that his stamp had been used. The title reverted. Quietly. No press, no public filing beyond the standard record. The forged deed was voided and a corrected title was recorded in both our names as it had originally been. Daniel didn't know. There was no reason he would have checked. He already thought he'd won. I also spoke very carefully with a detective in the county where the false deed had been filed. I want to be clear about something. I did not walk in demanding my brother be arrested. I walked in with a folder of documents, sat across from a professional, and answered every question she asked me completely and truthfully. What happened after that was the legal system doing what the legal system is supposed to do. I had no control over the timeline. I was not orchestrating anything. I was just ready. And then the text message came. "You will sign over your share of the house by Friday, or I will make sure everyone in your firm knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Your choice." I put the phone down. I picked up my pen. I went back to my closing documents. And then, after a few minutes, I picked my phone back up. I screenshotted the message. I emailed it to my colleague. I emailed it to myself. I saved it in 2 places in cloud storage. And then I typed back one sentence. Understood. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted him to feel certain. Friday came. I did not sign anything. Daniel called at 9 in the morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at noon. I texted back, still thinking. Need the weekend. He waited. He was patient the way people are patient when they think they already have what they want. That Saturday, I drove out to the house. I let myself in with my key. I walked through every room slowly. The living room where we opened presents on Christmas morning. The hallway where my mother kept the school photos in frames, both of us getting taller, and then suddenly adult and strange looking. The kitchen with the drawer. My father's reading chair still in the corner of the den, a little worn on the right armrest. I sat in that chair for a while. I wasn't sad exactly. I was something that takes longer to name. Something like the feeling of putting something down after you've carried it so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. I locked the house. I drove home. On Monday morning, my colleague called me. She said, "The warrant was issued this morning. They're going to move on it today." I said, "Okay." She said, "Are you all right?" I thought about it genuinely. "Yes," I said. "I think I actually am." I heard from the detective the following day. Daniel had been taken in for questioning Monday afternoon. When presented with the voided deed, the notary statement, and the alibi documentation, he had initially claimed I had given him verbal permission to handle the paperwork on my behalf. The detective had then shown him the timeline of the deposition transcripts. Then she had shown him the text message. "You will sign over your share of the house by Friday, or I will make sure everyone in your firm knows exactly what kind of person you really are." The detective told me his attorney had him stop talking at that point. The charges, deed fraud, forgery, filing a false instrument, were filed formally 3 weeks later. I did not call Daniel. I did not text him. I did not reach out to our aunt, who called me twice and left voicemails I listened to once and did not return. There are people in the family who believe I should have handled this privately, that I should have given him a chance to fix it. That blood is blood, and this is not what our parents would have wanted. I have thought about what our parents would have wanted many times in my life, and I've spent a lot of that time warping myself around an answer that was always more about keeping the peace than telling the truth. My father painted those shutters green himself. My mother planted roses she will never see again. They built something real, and they left it to both of us, not because Daniel deserved it and I didn't, but because we were both their children. He didn't accept that. He decided his need was bigger than the legal reality. Bigger than my name on a deed, big enough to justify forging my signature on a legal document and threatening my career in a text message when I didn't fall in line fast enough. I spent 29 years trying to earn a place in my own family, trying to be good enough and patient enough and not difficult enough, that eventually they would see me clearly and give me what they gave Daniel without him asking for it at all. That doesn't work. That has never worked. That is a hole with no bottom, and you can spend your entire life falling into it and never once touch ground. The house goes on the market next month. My half of the proceeds is going into a down payment on a place in Portland, which is closer to the friends I have made over the past 4 years who see me clearly without me having to earn it. I have a garden plan, nothing elaborate. Some herbs, some tomatoes, maybe eventually something that blooms in October. The rose cuttings are in a box in my car. I took them from my mother's garden last Saturday. Bare root, wrapped in damp newspaper the way she taught me. I don't know if they'll take. I've never planted roses before, but I know they came from something that survived for years in ground that wasn't always easy. I think they probably know how to do it. I don't have Daniel's number saved in my phone anymore. That's not a dramatic gesture. I didn't delete it in some moment of resolution with music playing. I just looked at it one afternoon, his name sitting there in my contact list, and thought about what it would feel like to never see it again. And then I thought about what it would feel like to see it. And the answer was simple. Some exits don't have a door slamming. Some of them are just a quiet walk through a house you know by heart, turning off lights as you go, and then stepping outside and letting the lock catch behind you. I drove away. I didn't live back at the house. I already know what it looks like. I have thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not to act. When the moment came, I knew exactly what to do. I mean, why it took so long to stop believing things would be different. That's the harder question. There's a pattern that shows up in families like mine, and I think it's worth naming clearly. One child is given the message, early and consistently, that their job is to hold things together, to be capable, to be stable, to not need too much. The other child is given the message that their needs are the center of gravity around which everyone else should orbit. Neither child chooses this, but both learn to perform their assigned role so completely that after a while it stops feeling like a role at all. It just feels like who you are. I was the one who held things together, and for a long time I confused that with being loved. What happened with my brother was not a single bad decision on his part. It was the end of a very long road that was built piece by piece out of choices, his and mine and our parents. Every time someone covered for him, every time a consequence was softened or redirected, every time I absorbed something he should have carried himself, the road got a little longer and a little straighter toward exactly where we ended up. A forged deed, a threatening text, a detective's folder on a table. Actions accumulate. That's not a mystical idea, it's just true. The things we do, consistently, over years, shape the people we become and the situations we eventually find ourselves in. My brother spent decades learning that he could take without consequence. I spent decades learning that my value was contingent on my usefulness. Neither of those lessons served either of us. One of us just realized it sooner. What I want to say to anyone watching this who recognizes something in it, whether you're the one who's been carrying everything or you're somewhere earlier in a story that looks like it might be heading somewhere familiar. Is this? Clarity is not cruelty. Knowing what is actually happening and responding to reality instead of to what you wish were true is not a betrayal of the people you love. It is the only honest thing you can do. I didn't set out to have my brother arrested. I set out to protect what was mine, document what was real, and stop pretending the situation was something other than what it was. The legal system did what it does. The consequences that followed were the direct result of choices he made, freely, over a long period of time. I didn't manufacture that outcome. I just stopped absorbing it. There's a version of strength that looks like endurance, staying, tolerating, continuing to show up no matter what it costs you. I lived inside that version for a long time and I thought it was admirable. Now I think real strength looks more like precision, knowing what you actually owe someone, knowing what you don't, being willing to act on the difference even when it's painful, even when people call it cold, even when the noise from the people who benefited from your silence is very loud. The rose cuttings are on my passenger seat. I don't know if they'll take root in new ground, but they survived everything that came before. I think that counts for something.